been at least 16 minutes since I last tinkered on the car, so it's time to do something else. Something else that's been annoying me since day one, and that is quite obviously the fan. Now, why would the fan annoy you? Well, mainly because it just spins around inside the engine bay and tries to snap your fingers every time you go anywhere near it. Now that isn't really an issue most of the time, because most of the time you're not going to be anywhere near the fan anyway. But sometimes you do need to be there. You're checking on your pulleys, you're looking for water leaks, you're trying to get a timing light down in there, whatever it is you're trying to do, and that fan is in there spinning away, doing its thing all the time. Makes life a little bit difficult. Now the thing with that fan is, you don't need that fan running all the time. The only time that fan needs to be running is when you're A, up to temperature, and B, standing still, so there's no air going through your grill, going through your radiator, i.e. sat in traffic or, you know, whatever. Stood still with the engine running up to temperature. And even then, you only need a slight draw of air through that radiator to actually have the cooling, capillary, thermo effect words that it needs to actually cool the water down. So the other 9/10 of the time the fan is spinning, it's just pointless. You know, it's pulling air through the radiator trying to cool things when you're trying to get your engine up to temperature, which is pointless. And yes, I know the thermostat isn't open, so therefore there is no water going through the radiator anyway, but you know what I mean. It's spinning around, it's doing nothing. It's pulling a draw on the crankshaft. Obviously, as a fan spins, it creates drag. That's how fan prop blades work. They create drag, which is creating drag on your water pump, creating drag on your crank. So by taking that fan off, you're going to get a smidgen of power increase, and we're not talking much, guys, but you get a tiny bit of power increase because it's one less thing drawing on the crank. And it's just, again, going to save my fingers if ever I want to go in there and do any, again, check on the timing or anything like that. It just makes life a lot easier. Having a smaller fan in a safety cage up against the radiator rather than this big whirling death wheel with blades on it, which is trying to snag you up every time you go near it. Normally I probably wouldn't bother even doing something like this. Not a big deal really, is it? But the fact is, these fan kits are quite cheap. And I like tinkering on the car, and I like making videos, so why not? So, the fan in question we've got is this chap. It is an Aeroline 9-inch 80 watt. Whether that's any good or not, I don't know. The fact is, this whole kit, this isn't just a fan, guys, there's a kit inside here as well. But the whole thing, I think, was like 30 quid on eBay. So for 30 quid, it's a bit of a no-brainer, really. So let's get it all out so we can have a look at it, and I'll talk you through what you got and how it works. Okay, so obviously, first of all, we've got the fan itself. She's pretty slim. She's only about, oh, that's probably an inch across there, and another inch on the back. So it's about 2 inches, 2.5 inches deep, which is pretty good. Spinny blades of death, but conveniently locked behind a shield. Wiring, a couple of plugs, whatever. Now, point to note with fans. When you look online, you can find other pushing or pulling fans. Now, most people will know this anyway, but I'll just, lay it out there for those that don't. When it comes to DC electronics or DC motors, if you reverse the polarity, i.e. switch the positive and negative, the fan will spin the other way. That's how DC motors work. So whether you want it on the front of the radiator or on the back of the radiator, pushing or pulling, it doesn't matter. Don't look for a pushing or pulling fan, just buy any fan kit and you can always switch the old wires over. Nice and simple. Haven't tested it yet. The reason I've got a 9-inch fan is because I've measured the radiator and that's the biggest one I can get. Spitfire radiator, or at least mine, the 1500, is 9.5 inches top to bottom, so, and it's not wide enough to put two of them in next to each other. And from what I gather, doing a bit of homework, you just don't need it. You just need something creating a through draft to the radiator. So I'm sure a small fan like this will be absolutely fine. Then you also get the mounting kit as well. So we've got these chaps, which are something like a cable tie. But whereas a cable tie needs to be passed back through itself, these don't. So you get some little felt pads with a hole in the middle. These just go on the end. You then get the actual retaining clips themselves. These just obviously slide down these ribbed shafts. Click, 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 until you get to the point where you want it, and then you can snip the end off. You get some springs These will obviously sit on the back here, and they're just designs just so when your fan is up against your radiator, you've got a little bit of play in it with your springs. And then on the other end, you've got the same things again. You've got your plastic retaining clips and a couple of little felt pads with holes poked in them. This one was clearly the end of the roll, and they couldn't bother to put a bigger one in. I don't care. It is just literally a little bit of squishy neoprene. So that's the mounting kit. They also just get passed straight through the radiator, clip on either end, pinch them up to the point you're happy with it. That's it. 4 of these little doodads. As you can see, they've got a little tongue and groove on one end, and I'm guessing these fit in here. Boop, yes they do. So you can either mount it using the holes provided in the fan itself, or these ones, which again bring the holes a bit further away from the fan. Obviously we'll get it in there and we'll see how it sits. And then lastly, the thermostat itself. This is a relay. It's got 3 pins, like most relays do, and a temperature sensor. Now, I'm not sure how the temperature sensor itself works. This isn't a wire, this is actually a steel, this is a metal tube. I'm guessing this is probably filled with mercury, and as the temperature increases, it pushes back into this and hits a switch. You've obviously got a twisty dial in centigrade for what temperature you want the fan to come on at. And before I read the wiring instructions, normally on these you'll have a negative, a positive, and then the switch negative. So when it gets to a certain temperature, it basically closes between the 2 pins. I'll explain more in a second when I've got my wiring diagram. And you get a handy little guide there. Tells you aren't even read it yet. Oh, there you go. So, fan designed to be mounted directly onto the radiator, blah 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 blah, etc. etc. There's your little diagram for mounting it. Rods go through the radiator, clips and springs on that side. And then the thermostatic switch, as we can see there, power in, power to fan, and it's a 12 volts switched. Okay. So pretty straightforward. That little chap actually sits in your top radiator hose. You slacken your hose off, you slide him in, and pinch the hose clip back up again, and hopefully that is thin enough that you're not going to get any water leaks coming from around it. But obviously we'll see when we actually come to fit it. So the only addition that I'm going to make is I'm going to also wire a switch in line. I want a switch on the dash, and I'll probably put an LED in as well. So the idea being I'll wire a very small LED into the circuit, which will go somewhere on my dash. This will basically light up when my fan comes on, just so I know when the fan is running. I'll also then have a secondary switch, probably a little toggle switch, a little metal one in keeping with the year of the car, which will just be a master switch for the fan. This basically means that, if I ever am in any doubt as to whether the fan is running or the thermostat breaks for whatever reason, you're driving along, you see your temperature climbing up and you're thinking that fan ain't running, you can flick the switch, which will just give 12 volts straight to the fan, and obviously therefore run it up for you. Just in case anything ever goes wrong with the thermostatic switch, why not have a secondary switch in line? If you're wiring stuff in anyway, it's not a problem to put a switch in online as well. So to show you that on a very, very basic schematic, and again, any electrical engineers out there, please excuse my wiring diagram, but I'll run it out for you as best I can. So we have our 12 volts, which is our battery, right? Positive comes off the battery, it goes to the relay, and it also goes directly to the fan. The negative side obviously goes to the negative side of the relay. This is meant to be the little temperature sensor. And the fan negative obviously goes to the negative on the relay. So the idea being, once this senses the correct temperature, it closes these 2 points, therefore creating the circuit. It's already got a positive, which again I've got the positive showing direct from the battery. It will be a switched live. I'm not going to use direct power from the battery. It'll be on ignition. So your fan's always getting your voltage, and then it gets your negative when your temperature sensor gets up to temperature, and that will then turn the fan on. We also, then coming off the negative for the fan, we also have a switch wired in line, which is going to be the switch in the dashboard, which obviously returns to ground. So that if this switch closes, the circuit's complete, the fan runs. Or if this negative is closed on the relay, again, the circuit's complete, the fan runs. So again, unnecessary, maybe, but for my peace of mind, it's no, again, great hassle just to put a little sneaky switch in somewhere and run a bit of wire out to it. I try and get it as tidy as I can because my wiring is a bit, you know, my wiring's okay, but I tend to leave things long and just put zip ties on them all the time. So I'm going to try and get some nice, actual, flexible conduit and tidy the wiring up. Whether I do it today or not, I don't know, but we'll do it at some point. Yeah, it's just so we've got a dummy switch in the dashboard just in case I'm in any doubt as to whether the thermostat is running, and if I wire a little LED in there as well, even better, because then I can tell categorically whether the fan is running or not. If I wire it into the same power line as the fan's got power, the LED gets power. If the LED is not on and my temperature's climbing, I know the fan isn't on. You get the idea. So, let's flip the old bonnet open, get a bit of space, and then we can have a look how this fan is going to mount. Right, so obviously this is the old mechanical fan. It sits on the front of the water pump and pulls air through the radiator this way. Now we've got two choices with our new fan. I haven't mounted it on there yet, I've literally just poked it in there. It actually fits in there pretty perfectly. You can either mount it to the front or you can mount it to the back. Now ideally I like the space in here, so first of all I'm going to try mounting it to the front. Now people will say you don't want to mount it to the front because obviously the fan is going to be restricting airflow through the radiator. That's why you generally want the fan on the back of the radiator. However, if I just swing you around a little bit, you can see there's quite a lot of room there with the matrix on both sides. So you're still, and obviously what comes through the blades. So you're still going to get plenty of natural airflow through there. The only bit that's going to be restricted is right in the middle where the motor is. The rest of it on both sides still has plenty of airflow. So I think if we were mounting maybe two fans side by side, which a lot of modern cars have, I think that might be an issue. Because again, you're going to restrict a lot of that natural airflow. But with a wide radiator like that and a single fan, I think we'll probably be okay. So what I'm going to do is try fitting it to the front for the time being. If I find there's any issue with overheating or anything like that, then I can just simply snip the, you know, the little cable tie things off, get some more, flip it over to the other side, put it on the other side. So it's no, you know, it's no big deal. In terms of wiring, because I put in my aftermarket horns, all my wiring I have here, which is going to make life nice and easy in terms of wiring. I've got a ground here and I've got a switch live here. So the only wires I need are here already. Now obviously I said I'm going to have a dummy switch somewhere inside, maybe even an LED that comes on when the fan's running, just so I know peace of mind it is running. So obviously I'll still need to put the wiring in situ for that. I'm not too sure where we're going to put that yet. Probably, I mean, to save actually chopping up the existing dash, I imagine I'll put them down here where my new gauges are. So I may well just put a little switch in the middle and a little LED above it, and that way I can just cut into that panel, and obviously I'm not touching any of the existing dashboard. You know, you don't want to chop up your dashboard, do you? So then in terms of the mounting, going to have our little pass through, going to have our spring on the back. That is then going to go through the mounting eye, and then on the other side of the mounting eye here, where it touches the radiator, is where we put our foam pad on. Like so. So radiator is here, through the radiator, felt pad presses onto the radiator fins to stop it, you know, bending, binding. Fan attaches to these, 4 of those on the corners, and then on the other side we will then have another mounting pad here, and then finally the little locking ring on the back of that. So make up 4 of these and we can get her stuck on. Okay, she's in there. My little mounting discs on the back. So that's in there absolutely fine. I've just tested the voltage on it, and obviously you've got a blue and a black here. With these wired up as you see them, so negative being black and positive being blue, it does indeed push air this way through the radiator, which is what we want. So when we wire that one up, we keep the wiring colour as it is, if that makes sense. Now, on the wiring diagram, they do show, when you are wiring in your thermostatic switch, that you have your 12 volt switch coming in, and that goes to your positive in your fan, and then your fan just grounds. However, I don't want to do it like that. I want to do it the other way around. I want my negative to be switched and my positive to be, you know, switched live. Okay, auxiliary switch is now wired in. Bonk. Down there, it needs a bit of tidying up, but we have a switch there nonetheless. Okay, now we have the thermostat switch mounted, which is this chap here. So all I've used is a bit of double-sided sticky neoprene. It's the same stuff I use to stick badges on the car. I haven't actually shown you the badges yet. I'll show you them quickly. You may have seen them in a previous video. I made a whole video about them and I decided not to include it because it was a bit off topic. But while I'm thinking about it, I'll show you quickly. 3D printer and a bit of aluminium foil tape over the top, trimmed to suit. So we've got a roll of sticky back, double-sided sticky neoprene, which we use for sticking car badges on. It is proper 3M car badge sticky stuff, so it is super sticky. Once it's on, it's on. So I've used a bit of that to stick that on. Now, as you can see, as you can see, I've had to coil the excess for this heat sensor around the actual unit itself. I couldn't think of a better way of doing it. It's a little bit ugly, but in the grand scheme of things, you know, the car isn't particularly good looking either, so there we go. Obviously the sensor itself goes up inside the top radiator hose here, so the idea is as soon as the thermostat opens, ow, don't do it, it's hot. As soon as the thermostat opens and the water starts to flow back through here, the actual sensor itself sits in here, and that obviously then actuates your switch on the relay on here, which turns your fan on. Now obviously you've got a bit of wire poking out here, and I'm hoping that's not going to leak. They say you can stick a bit of silicone in around it, but I'm really hoping that doesn't leak because I've had it up to here with radiator leaks. Also, trying to get stuff inside this hose without damaging it is a bit of a job in itself. This hose, whilst it looks like a concertina shape hose, it's not a lot of movement in it. You can move it probably an inch at best. So I ended up having to just take the bolts out the top of the radiator so I can pull the radiator forward slightly to give me a bit more slack. And then just using a screwdriver, pushing it up there to make a channel, and then slide the temperature sender up beside the screwdriver in the channel. Poke it all the way through until you feel it drop down, slide the screwdriver out carefully, and then obviously do your Jubilee clip back up. And hopefully that's it. Hopefully I haven't damaged it, but of course we'll find out. My shirt back on. You don't want to see my hairy chest. It's about 30 degrees down here at the moment. I know everywhere's having a bit of a heat wave, but it's hot. And crawling around inside a car isn't making me any cooler. So I take my shirt off to work. So I don't want to talk to the camera with my shirt off. You don't deserve that. You deserve better. Where was I? Can't remember. Something about that. Oh yes, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to wire the electric fan up in its entirety. Once it's all done, and I can A, check it works with the toggle switch, and then B, check it works on the temperature sensor, i.e. when the car is up to temperature, I'll pull over to the side of the road, let it idle, and obviously the fan should kick in. At that point, once I know the fan is working as it should, then I will take the old fan off. But for the time being, I may as well just leave it on because I don't want to take it off, go drive somewhere, and then see my temperature go and then find out I've wired it in wrong, and then be stuck having to sit there, wait for the car to cool down. Yeah, the old fan won't stop the thermostat opening. No, it won't. No, the thermostat will still open, even with the old fan doing its thing. So yeah. Check it first of all, make sure it all works. Once I'm happy it is spinning away happily, doing its fan thing, cooling the radiator, and then obviously the fan cuts back out again, and it does that a couple of times so I know it's working fine. Then I'll go and unbolt the old one, take that off, and then we can sort of call it done. But again, just got to get all the electrics sorted for the time being. So We're over halfway there, I reckon. This, I knew it was going to be a reasonably simple job, but it's a little bit fiddly, I'll be honest, because you're just down in there and there isn't a lot of space, so it is a bit fiddly. It's not difficult, it is a bit fiddly. Obviously, if I didn't have the switch mounted in the dash, it would have been a lot easier. I wouldn't have had to go in there and cut holes and file them out and all this kind of stuff to put a toggle switch in there, but I just feel better putting a toggle switch in. I know that if I don't do it now, when it's done, I'll wish I had done it, and then I'll have to go and start splicing into my wiring to put the negatives in. So I'm just like, well, you're here. It's just a belt and braces type approach. Right, that's my switch all wired in, so it should work. We'll test it in a second. So down here, you have, if you can see it, a blue wire and a black wire coming through the radiator grill. Blue is positive to the fan, black is negative to the fan. So this wire, which is presently attached with a jockey block, I'll change that and I'll solder up properly in a minute. So that wire runs all the way down into the dash, into our switch, and then comes back through the other strand of wire and comes down here, and I've just tapped it into a negative down here, which I think was originally for the horns. I'm guessing so, because there's a purple one right next to it, which is my horn is on. But that one was unused, so we've tapped into that for the time being. So the negative just goes down into the cabin, back to ground. So when the switch is closed, and the when the switch is closed, it will come on. The positive for it comes off the blue wire, comes up conveniently another piece of white wire, because it's all I've got, and I've tapped that onto the switch live, which sits here, which is for the relay for my horns. Because again, I've got a switch live right here. There's no point going back to a fuse or anything else, because I've got one right here, and that line is also fused as well. So it makes sense just to tap into it if you've got it there. So switch live on the ignition for the horn, negative goes into the cabin onto the switch. So let's turn the key, press the button, see if it works. Right, let's give it a try. So ignition on, switch on. Okay, success. Hopefully you could hear that. Probably couldn't see it, but you can probably hear it. It makes a hell of a racket, and you can watch the voltage drop as well. With the ignition on, obviously you get 12 volts on my little volt gauge. As soon as you turn the fan on, it drops down to 10 volts. So it pulls a fair old whack. It's an 80 watt fan, so obviously you don't want to run it with the ignition off too often, because it's going to kill your battery, obviously. So, but again, it's only ever designed to run with the ignition on, with the engine running, so it's not a problem. So all that will be left to do then, afterwards, will be just to wire in our relay for our temperature sensor. On second thoughts, no. No, you don't want the thermostat that's going to control the fan set to the same temperature as the thermostat in your car that opens, because otherwise the fan's going to be running the whole time that the thermostat is open, which we don't need and we don't want. We want the fan to kick in when the water temperature is increasing beyond what it normally would. So on my car it's an 82 degree thermostat, so the thermostat will open at 82 degrees. At this point water starts circulating through the radiator and is therefore going to get cooled by the breeze going through the car. However, if you're sat in traffic and there is no breeze going through your car, that temperature is going to slowly climb. Once that temperature gets up to say 90, which most modern cars run at, which is what I'm going to set my thermostat to, that's when the fan kicks in, and that will then bring it back down again. Otherwise the fan's going to be running all the time, and when you think about it in your modern car, the fan doesn't run all the time, does it? It only comes on every now and again when the car gets hot. So that's what we'll do. Set the thermostat to 90, as in the temperature control unit for the fan will be set to 90. So at 82 degrees I'll get circulation. If it climbs up past 90, that's when the fan will kick in. And of course, because it's got a dial, I can adjust it a little bit if I need to as time goes on. And again, we've got the dummy switch inside the car, so that if I'm, if I'm not feeling it or something's going on, I can flick the switch and do it all myself anyway, which was the whole point. So the fan wiring is now done. Now I do need to get in here and tidy it up a little bit. As you can see, it's a little bit all over the shop, as these wiring jobs often are. That's just the way it goes. I'm going to get in here later on and get some cable ties, and we'll tidy all this up. But we can only tidy it up so far, right? But that's it. She's mounted. So now we have the negative for the unit, which is spliced into the negative here, which just goes to ground. The other side of the negative, this one here, goes in and joins the negative for the actual fan itself. So when that gets to temperature, the relay closes those 2 points, grounds the fan out. The fan's got its constant live anyway, the fan will then kick in. Or alternately, I've got the negative running down inside the car, up to my switch and back to ground, so I can control it either way. Pretty straightforward really. So the only thing left to do is to actually try it. So I'm going to have to man up now, take my old fan off, and then we'll drive around and see what happens. Water temperature is in the green. Fan isn't on, but if I bring the thermostat back a little bit, now it is. So I've got to set the thermostat a little bit higher. That's showing 100. But my actual temperature gauge is showing 85. And keep in mind it's very hot at the moment, it's about 30 degrees here, so probably need to test it in not quite so, or actually, no, I suppose you want to test it in the hottest temperature possible, don't you, to get a true reading. So that's it, guys. So a little bit of tweaking with the thermostat. The temperature that my gauge is saying doesn't necessarily equate to the temperature that the thermostat wants to open at. My gauge was saying it's about 85, the thermostat was more like 95, so I think it's probably the twisty control on the thermostat rather than my gauge. Either way, engine isn't running over, it's not boiling, it's not doing any of that bad stuff. The gauge was still very much in the middle, and like I said, it's a very hot day today, so a good day to test it. We don't normally get hot days like this in the UK. We get maybe a couple weeks a year of hot weather, what we call hot. In the southwest where I am, it's quite breezy, it's quite nice. We don't really get up to 30 very often. It's normally around 25, 27 on a hot summer's day. But up, when you go further up country, up towards the southeast, it can get up to like 40 odd degrees up there. It's pretty nasty. So we don't get the extreme heat down here in the southwest, which I like. We're on a peninsula, we're sticking out into the sea. We get a bit of breeze, which is quite nice. I'm not one for hot weather. But the car seems to be fine. It hasn't boiled, which is good. No water has come out of it. The thermostat switch makes the fan come on and go off, so clearly it's wired right. And my dummy switch inside makes the fan come on and go off as well, so everything appears to be working. If there's any problems with it, I'll feed it back in future, but I think we're going to call that one done, guys. As always, thank you very much for watching. Hopefully it's been of use to some people. Not a bad kit for 30 odd quid on eBay. I won't leave a link down below because obviously eBay links expire, but I'll leave a description of what I searched for on eBay to find it. It's all the same stuff. In case you want to do the same with your car, get rid of the old manual fan, get a bit of horsepower back, and obviously take a bit of effort off the crank. So, see you next time.